Great. Well, let's get started. Thanks so much for being here. This is part of the Lunchtime Reboot for Parents series offered through xMinds. And today I think today is the third or the fourth. I think it might be the fourth. And we are going to talk about how to increase our mindfulness intake every day just by being parents, just by interacting with our kids, and especially with our autistic kids. Okay, so how do we connect with our autistic kids as a form of mindfulness? And I'm going to try to be very practical and give you lots of different exercises that you can try. Exercises and I guess sort of attitudes. Oftentimes, practicing mindfulness is not necessarily doing 1, 2, 3, although I will give you pointers in that regard because it just helps to remember. The mind needs these little anchors, right? But oftentimes mindfulness is really about an attitude. It's about connecting with our curiosity and almost seeing things as if for the first time, which can be quite hard with our children in general, and particularly when our kids are autistic. So today I'm going to give you 5 sort of types of exercises using your kid as an anchor for mindfulness, as a way to pay attention, using switching perspectives with your child, again, as a way of practicing imagining and basically our innate capacity to put ourselves in other people's situations. Also, I'm going to give you a very useful mindfulness acronym that I use a lot in difficult situations with our kids. I'm going to talk to you about the 3 A's, and then I'm just going to give you 3 very basic mindfulness exercises that you could also practice with your kid. Okay, and obviously I'm quite interested in our session afterwards in terms of any questions or anything you want to share, because I do want this to be as interactive as possible. So as I always start with a very short, very simple breathing moment. It's not an exercise, we breathe all the time, but let's just become aware of our breathing right now. We don't have to do anything to it, we don't have to change it. I'm inviting you to just take a minute, take 2, 3, 4 breaths to really inhale and be aware of all the sensations of inhaling. And exhale, you can do it through your mouth. That tends to be quite releasing physically. And just notice if there is a release, and if there isn't, that's okay too. Just noticing your in breath and your out breath, and letting go of everything that has happened up until this point. Put it on pause. You can get back to it in 45 minutes. This is a time for you. So this is the takeaway. I always like to start off with the takeaway. Truly connecting to your autistic kid or kids requires a change in ourselves. In ourselves. We're always very focused on how can we support our kids to change themselves, to do this, to stop doing that, to all of the to-dos. And I'm not saying let go of that. That is also part of our responsibility as parents. But to connect to our kids mindfully requires us to change us. It's a change in us, in our perception, and in how we relate to the experience that we have of thinking about our kids as we are interacting with them. And this is where mindfulness can really help. And it has really helped me. So I'm not going to dwell too much on this because I think some of you might have already attended some of these sessions before, but I am a certified mindfulness teacher and a parenting coach, and I'm also mom to a son who is 14 at the moment and has a combined diagnosis of autism and ADHD. All my work is specifically focused on us, on the parents, because again, oftentimes We are entirely focused on supporting our kids, which is great and necessary, but we do not leave much time, energy, or effort actually to create a habit of well-being for us in our day-to-day, very hectic lives. And that takes a toll on everyone, not just on us, but also on our family. Okay, so just to remind you, mindfulness in very simple terms, it's just be here now. So it is an intentional practice. You have to be aware that you are practicing mindfully. That helps with the practice itself. You're observing what is here right now. And it sounds very easy, but I know it's hard to do sometimes because, again, our minds tend to go to the future and they tend to go to the past. And even when we are looking at our children and trying to be mindful, oftentimes our minds will wander to what happened last week, what happened 2 years ago when we got the diagnosis, and what's going to happen 15 years from now. Okay, and this is normal. So again, it is not about criticizing ourselves. It's about realizing that we have gone into the future or into the past, and to come back to the here and now. That is the practice of mindfulness, and to do it non-judgmentally, which again sounds very easy, but it's actually quite hard because we are always evaluating, and this is what the human mind is, and that's how it's designed. So the first kind of exercise is to use your kid. Let's use them as an anchor of our attention. Okay, so what I suggest you do is you observe your child when they are regulated and at ease. We're going to look at what happens in difficult situations, but this particular exercise is for when they are at home and they are not struggling with anything. They could be engaged in stimming, as long as obviously it's safe for them and for everyone, or they could be quietly watching something on TV or on their iPad, or they could be drawing, or they could be doing an activity that is pleasant to them, and that therefore means that they themselves are fairly regulated. And so again, the exercise is very simple. Take 5 minutes. And again, if you find it hard to press the pause button mentally in your head because you're thinking about all the things that you need to do, put a timer on your phone, and literally like a 5-minute timer, and just say, right, for the next 5 minutes, I'm gonna make a conscious effort to observe my child. And it's up to you, and obviously up to your child, up to what works best for you, whether you are far, whether you are near, whether you are trying to be as conspicuous as possible, or whether you're openly there. It obviously will depend on the situation, and you can try it in many different situations. But the idea is that you give yourself, and you can start with 2 minutes if you find that you can't spare 5 minutes. Just be there observing your kid. Now, look at them as if you were looking at them for the first time, and really go into the micro level, okay? Rather than sort of starting appraising what they're wearing, or, oh, it's too cold today, or it's too hot and they're wearing this, and then you go off into a whole tangent about how they're have all this rigidity about changing clothes, particularly when the seasons change, and off you go. And then, 5 minutes later, you're somewhere completely different, and you haven't actually paid attention to a kid, okay? So it's challenging. But again, it's a practice. So looking at our kids and becoming aware of when we go off on tangents, on mental tangents, it's that monkey mind that's kind of like swinging. Here I hone in on this particular issue and off I go. And then I grab another branch, and then I grab another branch, and then you're just chaining rather thought after thought after thought. And they tend to be evaluative thoughts. So thoughts where you're evaluating the situation, you're evaluating your child, you're evaluating what they're wearing, or whether they brushed their hair today or not. When you become aware that's what you're doing, you just let it go. When you become aware, you just stop engaging with those thoughts, okay? And you go back to observing them, looking at their eyebrows, at their hair, at the way they're sitting, the way they're holding a pencil or crayon, the way they're moving, but trying again not to evaluate. And I know this sounds easy, but it can be hard because the mind, especially as moms and dads, we tend to evaluate our kids constantly. And there is a positive function to that, okay? Because of course we're there to try to help, but that constant evaluation, it creates a distance, a gap between us and our kids, okay? So look, engage your curiosity. Oh, I wonder why he's holding the crayon like that, rather than he's holding the crayon wrong, or he's not holding the crayon like his occupational therapist has been teaching him to do. Just engage your curiosity. I wonder if it feels more comfortable. And yes, this is thinking, but you are aware that you're thinking, why is he doing this? But not from a critical point of view, but from a curious point of view. And curiosity will breed a warmth rather than criticism, or evaluating breeds anxiety. Actually, it breeds kind of like stress, because there's always a to do. Oh, he's not doing this correctly, or he's stimming too much, it must mean that, and then therefore I need to, and blah blah blah, and then off goes the to-do list, right? So when you observe from curiosity, I wonder why he's having that hand movement, or he's engaging with that toy in that particular way, or I wonder why he's spinning, or I wonder why he's now suddenly looking up. What is he looking at? Is he looking at anything? Or maybe he's just, again, it comes from a different place, a non-judgmental place, okay? So look, hear, and touch if it's okay. And of course, this will depend on your child's profile, and also on whether it's appropriate for the situation, or whether you feel like it or not as well, okay? So look, we're looking, starting with our vision is usually quite helpful, because we are all visual beings, and so that tends to come in quite easily. Well, I can see things, right? We can always see things. Here, okay, are there any sounds? Is he making, or is she making any sounds? Sometimes that is also a form of stimming, as we all know. So are there any noises that are happening at the moment that are emanating from our kid, or maybe that are just in the environment that have nothing to do with our kid? But that is also a way to keep our attention focused on the here and now. And then again, touch them if they're okay with it, if you're okay with it, or just become aware of your own sensations, of the temperature in the air. Oftentimes touch with our kids, again, depending on their sensory profile and whether they enjoy or not enjoy touch, which I know is a big thing in autism. Sometimes touch can be extremely regulating. It can also be dysregulating. So again, use with care. But it can be very regulating, and it can be very comforting, both to our kids as well as to us, especially when there are no words, and especially when there are no agendas, when it's just, I'm stroking your hair because I want to, and I think that you will find it nice. As moms and dads, we kind of know what our kids like, okay? So that is also one way to stay present in the moment and to feel all those sensations. Okay, so this is one first kind of set of exercises that comes as an invitation to use your kid, just the pure presence of your child, as an anchor of our attention for a limited amount of time. You can start with 1 minute, you can start with 2 minutes, you can work up to 5 minutes, you can work up to 10 minutes. It will be difficult to avoid thinking. Of course, it will be difficult, because this is what our human minds do. This is what they're designed to do, okay? So here's a second sort of prompt, which is become aware of your perspective on your autistic kid. Again, without judging ourselves, because just as we judge our kids a lot, or as we evaluate our kids a lot, we also evaluate ourselves a lot, constantly, right? And we are usually as critical, if not more self-critical, than we are critical of others. So you can do this whilst you're observing your kid, but you can also do this without having your kid around. You can, you can think of a particular situation. It usually helps to have a particular situation, a particular context, a particular time. I would say don't choose a time that was very triggering, that was very difficult. Just choose let's say, just kind of a, normal day-to-day time context. You can do it whilst you're in that context, or you can do it afterwards. And just what immediately comes to mind when you think of your kid? Do you have any emotions? Do you start feeling a certain way? Are you not sure that you're having emotions, but you're definitely having a physical reaction? Sometimes we don't know very well how to read our emotions, but we know that something's going on. We might feel a clenching in our jaw, or a tightness around our chest, or in our sort of abdomen, or we might feel like a sudden acceleration of our thinking mind, our inner dialogue. Sometimes we get a sensation on our skin. So these are just things to pay attention to. And again, we're not judging them. We're not evaluating them. We're not saying they're wrong or that we shouldn't feel this way, or that we shouldn't have these sensations. We're just becoming aware of them, okay? When you think about your kid, do you also get the stories? Again, we all get the stories. We all have stories. We're storytelling animals, that's what we do. But what kind of stories? What kind of things do you tell yourself about your kid? Do you get the to-dos? Again, of course you get the to-dos. We all get the to-dos. What kind of to-dos are they? Are they like immediate future to-dos? Are they like far away future to-dos? Are they to-dos that demand a lot of yourself? Like, so I have to do this. I need to look into this. I need to call this person. I need to, reach out to this other person. Or is it more to-dos focused on your kid? Like, oh, he needs to do this. She needs to stop doing that. What kind of to-dos do you have? And here comes the tricky bit, not because it's tricky, because we all have that innate capacity to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Even autistic people can do that, but you know that it can look different for them. But we can, as parents, we can definitely try to put ourselves in their shoes, but we don't do it. And it's not because we don't want to, it's just because we're caught up in, our whirlwind of a life. So we don't carve out moments to do this. And this is the value of this exercise, okay? It's just practice doing it. Practice putting yourself in your kid's skin, in your kid's shoes. And again, if you find it hard, you can use a specific situation. Can you imagine how they perceived and processed that situation? And I would again suggest to start off, don't choose difficult situations for them. Choose a situation that is pleasant, maybe, or neutral. Something that they do quite frequently, maybe even daily, and try to imagine what it feels like to do it from where they stand and from where they live. And again, of course, we're imagining because we're not in their body, but we do have this innate capacity, and it is helpful to practice doing it because it takes you out of your own perspective. And again, it's the point of this exercise is not to get any kind of certainty about how your child perceives the world, given that you're not in your child's body to perceive the world as he or she does. The point of this exercise is to get outside of your own perspective sometimes. It's really, really, really helpful. Okay, so as autism parents, I don't have to explain to you, we do face a lot of difficult situations with our kids, sometimes without our kids as well. And they face a lot of difficult situations themselves with and without us. So this will immediately activate the stress response. And this is why stress levels in autism parents are as high as those of active duty combat soldiers. This has been studied. There was an NIH study done specifically on moms of, I think, teenage and adult autistic children, and their cortisol levels were measured to be equivalent of that of combat soldiers in active duty. And this is a study from 2009. So yeah, we've known this for a long time. I like to use this acronym, which is RAIN. And it is an acronym that was made very popular, very well known in the meditation community and beyond by Tara Brach, who is a meditation teacher here in the DMV area. And if you don't know her, I really, really encourage you to find out about her work. I think her website is tarabrach.com. Brach, B-R-A-C-H. She's not an autism mom, but she's an amazing and very well established meditation teacher and psychotherapist, clinical psychologist. So, RAIN: recognize, accept, investigate, and nurture. And again, bearing in mind that sometimes, and to begin with, it will be very difficult to do this at the same time that the difficult situation is unfolding, and that's fine. You can do it afterwards. Because again, in difficult situations, our stress response is triggered, it's automatic, is instantaneous. You know, we're going to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, just like our kids do. It shows up differently in us because we're grown-ups and because many of us neurotypical. And so we think immediately of our social standing, particularly in difficult situations where there are other witnesses around, there are other people around, you know. We do tend to have a very socially focused sort of handling of difficult situations. So the idea here is that you and again, I'm not asking you to do this at the time. At the time, you're literally trying to manage your stress, and oftentimes we're trying to help our kids regulate themselves. But afterwards, you can give yourself a couple of minutes to go through this process of recognizing what was activated. How did the stress response happen in you? So again, did your heart go crazy? Did your, your skin starts to prickle? Did you feel the adrenaline almost, coursing through your veins? Like, did you get a tightness in your jaw or on your face, or did you just feel tightness in your abdomen, in your gut? Did you feel heat coming up to your face? Did you feel your hands, tighten into fists? What was it? Again, this is really helpful because these are the immediate, automatic, sort of physical signs that we are in stress mode. And again, stress is very functional. It does help us to get activated especially in situations that could potentially be dangerous. Oftentimes the trick here is that our mind identifies situations as potentially dangerous when they're not actually dangerous for us or our children. They might be socially dangerous, quote unquote, but that's not the same thing as being run over by a car or being chased by a lion. But our mind is still using the same response, which is the stress response. And that is, of course, extremely tiring. And so we recognize those initial we recognize that we are stressed. And again, this seems so obvious, but oftentimes we do not recognizing, even if it's very quick, even if it's automatic, we do not recognize it until after we have done things that we then regret, or that we wish we hadn't done, or that we wish we had done differently. So recognizing the stress response being activated as it's being activated gives us more of a choice to respond rather than react automatically. Even if the stress response itself is very automatic. Okay, so you begin to become more aware of how you react. The A of accepting that what is happening. That does not mean that you're accepting that it is the right way, that things are unfolding, or that things couldn't go a better way, or that, certain skills could not be exhibited in that kind of situation. Okay, it doesn't mean, accepting does not mean it's the way you would want it to be. Accepting is just accepting that this is the way it's unfolding. And of course, when you accept that that is what's happening, you can do something about it. But oftentimes we preemptively reject what's happening. And from that point, it's much, much harder to pivot and to respond in other ways. And to not be filled with emotions like guilt or like regret or like anger or sadness. So what we are doing with acceptance is not accepting that it's okay to scream at people, or to have our kids scream at people, or to have other people scream at our kids. We're not accepting that aggression is the way to go, for instance. We're just accepting that that is what is happening right now. In order to be able to deflate the situation, to change what is happening, you first have to accept it. And this is actually a lot harder than it sounds, because our mind is continually saying this shouldn't be happening. The shouldn't be happening is completely unhelpful, because if it is happening, it's happening. Okay? So again, that does not mean to say that you can't change what's happening, but you can only change it from acceptance. Investigate is the interesting bit, because investigate is not a thinking process. It is a bit of a thinking process, in that what makes us suffer as parents, particularly of autistic kids, isn't so much what is happening, yes, of course, as well, but what meaning we give to what is happening. So if our kid, has not been invited to a birthday party, that in and of itself isn't a source of suffering. It doesn't need to be. What's a source of suffering is the meaning we give to him or her not being invited to a birthday party. So, and the meaning being, he's never going to have friends, she's never going to be invited to parties again, they're going to grow up to be lonely adults, they are never going to have a support network, etc., etc., etc. All of these thoughts are in the future, some of them in the faraway future, and they are interpretations. They're not reality. Because again, your kid might not have been invited to a birthday party for many reasons that actually have nothing to do with your kid, and all to do with the person who's hosting the party. Or it could also be to do with your kid. But then in that case, you can reflect on what is it that we can do to help our kid be better at ease in birthday parties. Or do they really need to go to that birthday party? Is that really their crowd? If he or she's not being accepted, do we really need to to put ourselves in with a wedge? Like how again, there's a lot of questions that, this opens up the space for thinking about these things, not just from fear, but from alternative perspectives. Okay, so what you're investigating here is, what meaning am I given to this situation? What does this situation mean to me? To me as the mother, to me as the father, okay? Not, because again, oftentimes we project. And maybe our kid is actually super happy to not have to go to that birthday party. I don't know, okay? So again, what meaning am I giving to the situation? And finally, the N for nurture. And nurture is super important, because nurture is basically, how do we deactivate our stress response? And oftentimes, just by opening up our perspective, that is one way of doing that, of just slowly but surely just toning down that stress response, rather than spiraling out into more stress-inducing cycles of thinking, catastrophizing and thinking far ahead in the future in very, very negative terms. You bring yourself to the here and now. What has happened? How have I felt about it? How have I reacted about it? What meaning am I giving to the situation? Okay, and I'm here, I'm now, obviously sometimes we need to take action, but you do it from a place that might not be calm, but it is certainly a little bit more centered. So RAIN, recognize, accept, investigate, and nurture. And just to kind of elaborate a bit more on this, and this is the fourth kind of exercise, which is, I use this as a trick because it helps me in, again, situations that could be emotionally demanding. A for autism. So here's another 3 A's: attend, accept, and act. And it's kind of another way of doing RAIN, but attend to your experience and how you relate to your kid. So I have a teenager. There's a lot of, increasingly more and more shouting and sort of saying no and putting boundaries on his part. How do I relate and attend to my experience of what I'm thinking about that, So how does that trigger me, basically? Okay, so again, oftentimes what we do is we focus on them because you did this, because you said that, because you didn't do this, because you didn't say that. But what about you? What about your internal experience? So what do I feel? Why is it maybe very triggering for me if my son yells or raises his voice? That has nothing to do with him. It has to do with what meaning I give to that. And it has probably to do with my own personal history of maybe being yelled at. Some people find it very triggering. Some people don't find it very triggering. Some people find it that it means a lack of respect, but it might not be coming from that point of view. Okay, so again, we just attend to our experience. How am I reacting, and why am I reacting this way? And oftentimes it's interesting to contrast it with our spouse or our partner and realize that he or she, faced with the same situation, does not think the same things that we do. Of course, because we have different minds and we filter things differently and we get triggered differently by things. Again, we accept the reality of what is happening. So if our kid is raising their voice or being very, very sort of cognitively inflexible, even though we're trying to be rational about something that they need to do, but they're still refusing because it's a different thing than what we did last week and they will not go for that, we accept that that is what is happening. That does not mean that we necessarily accept the outcome or that we necessarily accept that there will not be consequences, or again, this is all very context specific. So, right, but we accept that that is what is happening. Not necessarily that that is what needs to happen, but that is what is happening. If it's happening, we have to accept it. And then we act. So attend, accept, and act. And sometimes acting means not actually doing anything. Sometimes it does, oftentimes it does. Okay, but then we're acting from a different place because we've given ourselves a bit more mental space to take in what's happening, to accept what's happening, to also take in what's happening within us, and maybe opening up our perspective to be able to respond differently. It just creates a bit of space rather than repeating the same patterns over and over and over again automatically. And finally, I wanted to give you some exercise, 3 exercises. They're very, very simple. There's tons of information out there about how to do mindfulness with our kids. Again, this is very, very specific to your kids' profile, to their age, to their communication profile, especially to their sensory profile, because some kids do not like, certain typical mindfulness exercises like breathing. They might find it triggering. You might find it triggering. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 I spoke about in the last session. You have got, by the way, these sessions are all recorded and they're all available on the xMinds YouTube channel, so you can go back and have a look at that. But it's basically 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you can touch or that you can feel on your skin, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. And if you're not eating or drinking, you can always just taste your mouth, like basically what does it taste like. So this is just a very simple exercise to put ourselves in contact with our senses, okay? And we can do this with our kids. And depending on how old or how young they are, we can make it fun. The body scan, widely known, and we basically we can do it sitting down or we can do it lying. And again, the point is we're not doing these as an obligation. We're trying to get our kids to do it with us as a fun thing, because, you know, it really helps them too to practice mindfulness and to get in touch with their body, particularly at a time when they are well regulated and sensory, you know, they're not too activated. So again, you could do it lying down or sitting down, and you're basically just going through your body, like running a commentary. You know, you feel your feet. You can either start with your head and finish on your feet, or you start with your feet and finish on your head, and you're just going through the different parts of your body and just noticing them. You don't have to do anything, or you can make it a game of like tightening the different parts and then relaxing them. And then there's a whole bunch of breathing exercises. You can count breathes in and out. You can use balloon breathing, where you're trying to almost inflate your whole, basically your whole thorax, you know, like your belly and your chest. And sometimes, you know, with younger kids, they find it funny if you put a little toy on your belly, and when you breathe in, the toy goes up, and when you breathe down, the toy goes down. Again, these can be adapted to the age and the profile of the kid and the interest as well. You know, if they're interested in trains, you put a train on your belly and on his belly, on their belly. And then tracing, so, you know, an infinity sign, you know, in and then out, or a circle, or you can do it on the palm of your hand, you know, so breathing in when you go up and breathing out when you go down. So these are just some very simple ideas. Okay, how does it help you? Again, because it helps you to pause, and it takes you out of your usual thinking, even if only temporarily and briefly. It helps you to reset. It can help you to connect to your child's experience, and therefore relate to your child and to the situation slightly differently. And it can also free you from feeling like a constant victim of your own thoughts and emotions. So finally, you can scan that QR code, or you can just go to my website, which is maguimoreno.com/resources, to get to sign up and get this free 4-part audio series, which you can download and listen whenever you want on self-care for us parents.